In part 1, we considered how editing creates a feeling of pacing derived from the timing and rhythm of varying shot lengths. We also touched upon how our brain creates meaning by interpreting the relationships between shots in a sequence. In our compilation of shots from Tanada Yuki's 2008 film Hyakumanen to Nigamushi-onna, we created an ambiguous sequence open to, perhaps, a variety of interpretations. Perhaps a parent has interrupted their child's bath to tell them about the day's chores, for example. Or perhaps a landlord is interacting with a tenant in an inappropriate and unsettling way. Perhaps an elderly person is piecing together memories of their past, of happier or brighter days. Who knows? Here in part 2, we will learn some of the common editing techniques that help us build shared interpretations. Match-on action cuts link movement initiated in one shot through to the next in order to create the illusion of a spatio-temporal relation between the two, even if they were filmed in separate physical locations and, unless there is a multi-camera setup, at quite distinct times. Because the movement of the action appears to be continuous as a cause and effect relationship, we can interpret the two shots as sharing the same space and occurring sequentially, as one immediately after the other. An eyeline match establishes a relationship between a character and what they are looking at within the film world. This cut is especially crucial in filming conversations between characters when only one character is visible at a time. In these situations, a character's eyeline tells us where the other character or characters are in the film world, even though we can't see them. This sense of imaginary space is confirmed with the second shot, which often features a character looking back in the direction of where the character in the first shot is supposed to be. Since actors on the film set can be filmed individually, running through all of their own lines without other actors present, the eyeline match cut is an important device for creating a sense of shared space in the film, of who and what is where, even when we can't see them. Not all eyeline matches are created between characters. They are also used to create POVs, or point of view shots, which we introduced in the cinematography video. Seen on its own, it is impossible to tell if a shot is a POV. Instead, the idea that we are seeing through a character's eyes is created through the juxtaposition of shots, first of the character looking off screen, followed by a shot of the object of the character's gaze. Eyeline matches between characters often coincide with a pattern of cuts we call shot-reverse shot. Shot-reverse shot cuts are used multiple times in a single scene to create a back-and-forth momentum and reinforced spatial relationship. This is a common convention of conversation sequences. Shot-reverse shot patterns rely on the 180-degree system, which is a function of both cinematography and editing. In conventional filmmaking, every scene has a center line along which the action takes place. In order to preserve an understanding of space in a scene, the camera must always stay on one side of this axis, which we call the 180-degree line. In this example, the two characters are facing the same direction as they walk. But if the camera crosses the 180 line, that spatial relationship becomes confused. The two characters would then seem to be walking away from each other. Although the 180 line system is a rule for camera placement as an aspect of cinematography, the system would never exist without a consideration of editing. Another type of match cut is the graphic match. Although graphic matches sometimes appear within a single scene, more often than not they connect separate scenes as a form of transition. Whereas a match on action connects movement between two shots, a graphic match establishes a visual connection between similar shapes, colors, or overall visual composition. The graphic match is far more conceptual than other match shots. Instead of an explicit relationship like what we see in a shot-reverse shot pattern, an eyeline match, or a match on action, graphic matches inspire us to question the relationship between shots. They actively encourage us to interpret image juxtaposition and are often points in the film where viewer interpretations and experiences diverge. In addition to the graphic match, there are several other standard cuts that are used between scenes, as opposed to shots within a scene. Although the word montage originally referred to editing in general, over time it has taken on a different meaning. We now use montage to mean the combination of what would otherwise be separate sequences into one continuous scene, usually to compress film time and space. Often accompanied by a single piece of music that helps link the shots together, a montage can convey a wealth of information over a short period of time. We are probably all familiar with how this editing technique is used to show how a character learned to refine a certain skill, solve a complicated problem, or even just to provide significant character background in just a few moments. Crosscutting refers to a pattern of cuts used to suggest that two or more independent scenes are happening at the same time. The events might be interpreted as happening across great distances or, conversely, right next door, but we interpret the conjoined shots as sharing time rather than space. Like the shot-reverse-shot pattern used for conversations, cross-cutting must be established through the repetition of back-and-forth cuts. Without the aid of a pattern of cuts, we would interpret the events of the two scenes as happening in sequence, one right before the other, either forward in time or backwards. Speaking of which, the flashback and flash forward are also techniques of editing that connect one scene to the next as a manipulation of time. Since we most often interpret images in temporal order as real-time passing, time travel techniques like flashbacks and flash forwards usually require additional context clues. Perhaps a central character that ages or gets younger, or perhaps a place that changes visibly through seasons, both of which, by the way, are also examples of graphic matches. Edits that manipulate time and space in impossible ways such as flashbacks, flash forwards, and montages can be confusing. To help viewers make sense of the otherwise unrealistic, there are several editing techniques that assist with the concept of scene transition, be it a transition of time or space. Such transitions include fade in, fade out, iris in, iris out, wipe, and the dissolve. Each of these techniques has its own flavor to lend another layer to the film. For example, these transitions can be used to convey a psychological unsettling, a confusion of fantasy with reality, similarity or parallelism of otherwise contrasting ideas, or even to reinforce that we, as spectators, are actively engaged in voyeurism. Overtly stylistic transitions like the iris in or out fade in and out of popularity and often depend on the tastes of individual directors. Some are so strongly associated with particular auteurs that they have been used by subsequent generations as a form of inspired homage. Finally, film editors can also manipulate individual shots, especially with advancements in editing technology. Aside from the various visual effects we are familiar with on our own personal desktop and handheld devices, filmmakers working even in the pre-digital celluloid era could manipulate time within a single shot to create a sense of slow motion and, of course, its opposite, fast motion. Additionally, editors can create meaningful repetition in a film by using the same shot or sequence more than once, which is a manipulation of both time and space that encourages us to question why it might be especially important and what it might mean. So let's review some terminology first before we put our foundational knowledge into practice. With those techniques fresh in our minds, let's practice identifying edits so that we can think about what those edits do and might mean. Let's go back to the fight scene from Diner. In paying attention to cuts, transitions, and manipulation of individual shots, how does editing shape our experience and understanding of this scene? How do editing techniques contribute to a timing or pacing of the scene? How does the editing create and preserve a sense of film world, space, and time? Even without the context of the film's larger narrative, or subtitles if you don't understand Japanese, what does editing tell us about the relationship between the different characters? Can you tell who we should be rooting for? Who is the woman in the maid's outfit rooting for? Who won the duel? How do you know? Let's take a look. These first 4 shots, connected by match-on-action edits, introduce the character in the duel we are encouraged to emotionally support. His rise from a perhaps momentarily defeated crouch to a defiant standing rebound is broken up into 4 distinct shots. This not only accentuates the drama of this movement, but suggests his emotional determination and our reinforced alignment and respect to his resilience, because broken up in this way, the act of rising just looks more difficult. The slow motion effect in the 4th shot confirms a dramatic and stylized determination. It also gives us time to connect even more with the character, to root for him in the flurry of activity to come. This pause cuts to the fast action entrance of what we interpret to be the antagonist. While this coding is reinforced through aspects of mise-en-scène like her all-black costume, and cinematography such as the long shot that discourages emotional identification between character and spectator, the next sequence of shots in rapid succession diminishes her importance. This is reinforced by the next slow-motion glory shot of our hero, who is leaping to the attack and arrests our attention. Next, we have a grouping of short takes that creates a fast action pace, but you might have noticed that they all conform to the spatial expectations of the 180 line. As quick fragments, it would be easy to get confused, but because the 180 line is preserved, the sense of where these characters are and how they interact is maintained through the juxtaposition of match-on-action cuts, which also help preserve a sense of continuous time and space. The moment when the character in black poses in slow motion with a sword is joined to the next shot with an eyeline match back to our hero. The 180 line has created a face-off between 2 people, but the sequence is interrupted with shots of a 3rd character in a maid's outfit pounding at a door. We may not know why she is upset or where she is, but we interpret that she is somewhere outside the main action with assisted information from the mise-en-scène color scheme. Nevertheless, we interpret that she is reacting to the fight sequence in real time because of cross-cutting. We also can infer an emotional link between her and the hero of the duel due to the slow motion on his face in a moment of vulnerability that immediately precedes the shot of her pounding on the door. So with that head start, I encourage you to work through the rest of the scene. What is the result of the duel? How do you know? What's going to happen next? And what's with all those flower petals? Is there perhaps a graphic match or insinuation in the sequence that suggests what they might mean? And finally, how would the scene have been different if it had been a single take? How much meaning in this scene relied on the organization of 44 shots in just over a minute and a half? This is just an introduction to a few of the techniques editors use to make narrative and symbolic sense of what is ultimately a collection of film fragments. Editors help build film worlds in terms of film space, film time, and film meaning, but the individual shots recorded by the camera are not the only thing editors and filmmakers plan and manipulate together. We have one more formal film element to consider, and that is, of course, sound.